Every band has a breaking point. Sometimes it's a bad tour, a bitter contract dispute, or years of creative tension finally boiling over. But sometimes it's a single song. Here are 15 songs of the 70s that ruined your favorite bands. Number 15, Sheer Heart Attack by Queen. Sheer Heart Attack, 1974. Queen was still finding their footing in 1974. They had released 2 albums, built a devoted following in Britain, and were generating serious momentum. Then came the production of Sheer Heart Attack, and with it, one of the most disruptive crises the band would face in their early years. Freddie Mercury collapsed on tour in late 1973 with a serious throat condition, and by the time recording began for the new album, the band was functioning without their frontman for stretches at a time. Brian May developed a severe case of gangrene following a hepatitis injection and had to be hospitalized. At one point, the band was essentially recording around 2 severely ill members. The song itself, a fast, aggressive rocker that Roger Taylor had written, was later included on the album of the same name and gave the record its raw, driving energy. But behind the scenes, the chaos of recording it tested the band's ability to survive at all. The pressure of delivering an album with half the group incapacitated pushed relationships to a breaking point. Mercury had to record his lead vocals while physically weakened, and the sessions were described by those involved as grueling and tense. Queen made it through, and the album became their commercial breakthrough in North America. But the physical and interpersonal toll of that period left scars. Completing an album while 2 members were hospitalized required the remaining 2 to carry enormous pressure, and that imbalance, who showed up, who couldn't, who kept the sessions moving, was not forgotten. The band operated for years with unspoken anxieties about who carried how much of the load, and those anxieties would resurface more than once in the decade ahead, particularly as their individual commercial profiles began to diverge. Number 14, Layla by Derek and the Dominoes. Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, 1970. Layla is widely regarded as one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. It is also the song that effectively ended Derek and the Dominoes as a functioning band. Eric Clapton had assembled the group in 1970 with guitarist Duane Allman, and together they produced an album of extraordinary depth and emotional intensity. The song was Clapton's raw, barely disguised declaration of love for Pattie Boyd, the wife of his close friend George Harrison. Recording it brought the emotional stakes of the entire session into sharp focus, and the pressure of those emotions, combined with the band's heavy drug use during the sessions, made it nearly impossible to continue afterward. By the time the album was finished, the band had begun to fracture. Allman returned to his own group and was killed in a motorcycle accident in October 1971. Clapton descended into a years-long heroin addiction that effectively put him out of commission through much of the early part of the decade. A planned follow-up album was attempted in 1971, but never completed. The sessions were chaotic, unproductive, and the band simply stopped functioning as a unit. Layla lived on and grew in stature over the years, but Derek and the Dominoes never released another record. The song was both their greatest achievement and the moment the flame burned out. Number 13, The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy, Jailbreak, 1976. Guess who just got back today? Thin Lizzy had been working for years to break through to a mainstream audience, and in 1976, they finally did it. The Boys Are Back in Town became an international hit, reaching the top 10 in both the United Kingdom and the United States. It was the commercial validation Phil Lynott and the band had been chasing for the better part of a decade. The problem was what it cost them. The sudden success brought an entirely new level of pressure and expectation, and the band responded by touring relentlessly. The schedule was punishing, and the rock and roll lifestyle that came with that level of fame began to take a serious toll on individual members. Lynott's drug use escalated significantly following the band's breakthrough. Guitarist Brian Robertson suffered a serious hand injury during a brawl in 1977 that sidelined him at a critical moment. The instability in the lineup that followed, Robertson departing and being replaced, Gary Moore cycling in and out, meant that the band that had made Jailbreak never fully stabilized again. They continued to record and tour through the early 1980s, but the revolving door of personnel changes, combined with Lynott's deepening personal struggles, kept them from ever recapturing that moment. Lynott died in January 1986 from organ failure related to drug and alcohol abuse. The hit that was supposed to launch them into a long run instead marked the beginning of their unraveling. Number 12, Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. Thick as a Brick, 1972.
Really don't mind if you sit this one out.
Jethro Tull had been one of the most inventive rock bands of the early 1970s, blending hard rock with folk influences and Ian Anderson's unmistakable flute-driven style. With Thick as a Brick, Anderson pushed the concept further than almost any rock musician had attempted. The entire album was one continuous piece of music, a 45-minute satirical composition presented as a poem written by an 8-year-old. Critics and fans were divided. The record sold extremely well and reached number 1 in the United States. But the album also accelerated a creative drift that began to alienate the band's core members. The insistence on ambitious concept work concentrated more and more creative control in Anderson's hands. The band became, in many ways, a vehicle for his vision rather than a genuine collaborative unit. John Evan, Jeffrey Hammond, and eventually other longtime members grew increasingly peripheral to the creative process. By the mid-1970s, the lineup that had built Tull's reputation had largely dissolved. The band that recorded Thick as a Brick essentially ceased to exist in its original form within a few years, as Anderson restructured the group around new personnel more willing to serve the concept. The ambition that made the record remarkable was the same force that dismantled the team behind it.
Thick as a brick.
Number 11, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, A Night at the Opera, 1975. Queen's ambitions had been growing album by album, and A Night at the Opera was their most expensive and elaborate production to date. Bohemian Rhapsody, nearly 6 minutes long, combining ballad, operatic passage, and hard rock, was unlike anything on the radio in 1975. It became one of the best-selling singles of all time and made Queen genuinely famous across the world. It also hardened the creative hierarchy within the band in ways that created lasting friction. Freddie Mercury had written the song entirely on his own and arrived at the sessions with it essentially complete. The other members contributed performances, but the composition, the arrangement, and the conceptual vision were his alone. The stratospheric success of that approach left a question hanging over every subsequent Queen record: whose song would be the centerpiece and whose contributions would be secondary. John Deacon and Roger Taylor both struggled at various points through the late 1970s and 1980s with the sense that their songwriting was measured against that impossible standard. Brian May has spoken openly about the creative tensions that ran through the band's later years. Queen never broke up. Mercury's illness and death in 1991 ended that chapter. But the internal dynamics that Bohemian Rhapsody crystallized made the band's internal life considerably more complicated than their public image suggested.
Nothing really matters.
Number 10, Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas, Leftoverture, 1976.
Carry on my wayward son.
Kansas spent the first part of the 1970s developing a dense, progressive rock sound that drew comparisons to Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Leftoverture brought them their first major commercial success, and Carry On Wayward Son became their signature song, reaching the top 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. The tension it created was between artistic identity and commercial expectation. Vocalist and keyboardist Steve Walsh had been a driving creative force in the band's more adventurous material, but the commercial pull of radio-friendly rock put the band on a path that he eventually found irreconcilable with his original intentions.
Though my eyes could see, I still was a blind man.
Walsh departed in 1981, citing creative differences and exhaustion with the direction the band had taken since their breakthrough. Kansas continued and had further success with different lineups, but the band that had created their most revered work was effectively over. The commercial breakthrough that Carry On Wayward Son delivered locked them into a public identity they couldn't escape, and the internal disagreements about what that identity should mean drove away one of the central figures in their sound. Walsh went on to form a new band called Streets and later returned to Kansas briefly, but the original creative spark between him and the rest of the group was never fully restored. The song that opened the door for them was the same one that made staying together on their own terms nearly impossible.
Don't you cry no more.
Number 9, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, 1977. Rumors was recorded in the middle of complete relationship catastrophe. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks had broken up. John and Christine McVie were divorcing. Mick Fleetwood's marriage had collapsed. 5 people in profound personal crisis were recording an album about that crisis together in the same studio every day. Dreams was Stevie Nicks' contribution, the only number 1 single from Rumors, and its recording captures exactly how strained things had become. Nicks wrote it quickly in one sitting in a studio adjoining the main recording space while the others worked. She brought it in, and it went on the record with relatively little alteration. The album sold over 40 million copies worldwide and became one of the most successful records in history. But the personal cost was enormous. Christine McVie left the band in 1998, citing years of exhaustion from touring and the emotional weight of those relationships. Buckingham was fired by the band in 2018 following a dispute over touring commitments, ending a partnership with Nicks that had defined Fleetwood Mac for 4 decades. The tensions that Rumors documented never fully resolved. They just continued, album by album and decade by decade, until the band could no longer contain them. Number 8, Maggie May by Rod Stewart, Every Picture Tells a Story, 1971.
Wake up, Maggie, I think I got some.
Maggie May turned Rod Stewart into one of the biggest solo stars of the decade. It reached number 1 on both sides of the Atlantic simultaneously in 1971, and for a stretch of time, Stewart was inescapable, which was precisely the problem for the Faces. Stewart had been the lead singer of the Faces since 1969, and the band had their own loyal following built on hard touring, loose, celebratory rock and roll. But Stewart's solo career launched in parallel with his work in the Faces. began to outpace the band almost immediately after Maggie May broke. By 1971, Rod Stewart, the solo artist, was significantly more famous than Rod Stewart, the face of the Faces. The imbalance created resentment. Ronnie Wood and other members grew increasingly frustrated with the perception that the Faces were a backing band for Stewart's solo endeavors rather than a genuine group.
Oh, Maggie, I couldn't have tried.
Stewart's growing ambitions, his desire to move toward a more polished international sound, pulled him further from the raw approach the Faces favored. He formally left in 1975, and the band disbanded shortly after. Ronnie Wood was invited to join the Rolling Stones, which he accepted, and the remaining Faces members scattered to various other projects. The Faces had been a band with genuine chemistry, loose, warm, and unaffected in a way that Stewart's increasingly polished solo material was not. People who saw them live in their prime often describe it as among the most fun rock shows they ever witnessed. Maggie May gave Stewart everything he wanted. It just meant leaving behind the band that helped put him there.
So that's a pain I can do without.
Number 7, I'm Not in Love by 10cc, the original soundtrack, 1975.
I'm not in love.
10cc was a rare thing in mid-1970s British pop, a band that combined commercial instincts with genuine studio innovation. I'm Not in Love took months to record and involved hundreds of overdubbed vocal layers to create its ethereal, floating sound. It reached number 1 in the United Kingdom and became one of the most recognized recordings of the decade. It also revealed an irreconcilable split within the band. The 4 members of 10cc, Eric Stewart, Graham Gouldman, Kevin Godley, and Lowell Krem, had always operated as 2 distinct creative partnerships. Godley and Krem were drawn toward experimental, conceptually ambitious work. Stewart and Gouldman were more oriented toward crafted pop songwriting. The tension between those 2 instincts had produced 10cc's best music, but it had limits.
Don't tell your friends about the 2 of us.
In 1976, Godley and Cream left the band to pursue their own projects, citing a desire to work on more experimental material without the commercial constraints of the group. They developed an extended guitar attachment called the Gizmo and released an ambitious triple album that received a mixed critical reception. Stewart and Gouldman continued under the 10cc name and scored additional hits, including The Things We Do for Love in 1977. Both versions had moments of success, but neither recaptured the particular quality of what the original 4 had made together. The precise creative friction that produced I'm Not in Love, that push and pull between the experimental and the accessible, was gone, and both sides felt its absence for the rest of their careers. Number 6, Hotel California by the Eagles, Hotel California, 1977.
On a dark desert highway.
By 1977, the Eagles were one of the most successful bands on the planet, and Hotel California only extended that reach. The title track became their defining song, played on radio stations for decades, instantly recognizable within the first 2 bars. The album spent 8 weeks at number 1 and sold tens of millions of copies. It also marked the point at which the internal pressure within the band became unsustainable. The sessions for Hotel California were tense and drawn out. Don Henley and Glenn Frey had consolidated creative control over the band's direction and the contributions of other members, particularly Randy Meisner and Bernie Leadon, who had already departed in 1975, were increasingly marginal to the core vision.
Welcome to the Hotel California.
Meisner left the band in 1977, shortly after the album's release, citing exhaustion and creative frustration. The follow-up album, The Long Run, took 3 years to make and was an openly miserable experience by the accounts of those involved. Don Felder, Joe Walsh, Frey, and Henley were barely speaking at points during the sessions. The band broke up in 1980 at a concert in Long Beach. Frey and Felder were involved in a heated confrontation backstage that same night. Hotel California was the peak. The breakdown that followed it happened faster than almost anyone outside the band realized at the time.
Such a lovely place, such a lovely face.
Number 5, More Than a Feeling by Boston. Boston, 1976. Boston's debut album is one of the best-selling debut records in rock history. More Than a Feeling was everywhere in 1976. Its opening guitar riff was one of the most recognizable sounds of the decade. Tom Scholz had spent years building and perfecting that sound in his basement studio, and when it connected with the public, it connected in a massive way. The success immediately created problems. Epic Records wanted a follow-up as quickly as possible. Scholz refused to rush. He was a perfectionist who had built the band's sound painstakingly, and he had no intention of delivering a lesser product under deadline pressure. The conflict between Scholz's creative process and the label's commercial timeline produced years of legal battles and personal strain. Lead singer Brad Delp, whose soaring voice had been central to Boston's sound, grew increasingly frustrated with the long silences between records and the difficulties of maintaining a band that rarely performed or recorded. The second album, Don't Look Back, arrived in 1978. The third didn't come until 1986. Delp departed and returned over the years, struggling to find stable ground in a band built around one man's uncompromising creative process. He died in March 2007, and those close to him pointed to years of unhappiness in his personal and professional life as a shadow that never fully lifted. The song that launched everything came at a price that took decades to fully surface. Number 4, Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf. Bat Out of Hell, 1977. Bat Out of Hell is one of the most theatrical pieces of rock music ever committed to record. The song runs nearly 10 minutes, builds through multiple movements, and features a motorcycle crash metaphor elaborated with almost operatic intensity. Jim Steinman wrote it, Meatloaf performed it, and Todd Rundgren produced it. Together, they created something unlike anything else on the radio in 1977. The album it anchored became one of the best-selling records of all time. Over 40 million copies sold worldwide. And then, everything fell apart. The relationship between Meatloaf and Steinman deteriorated badly in the years that followed. The legal and financial disputes over rights, royalties, and creative ownership became protracted and bitter. Meatloaf suffered a severe bout of vocal problems in the early 1980s that left him unable to perform for a period. He and Steinman worked separately for years, each attempting to replicate the chemistry they had shared, and neither fully managing it without the other. Their partnership was eventually repaired enough to produce Bat Out of Hell 2, Back into Hell in 1993. But the intervening years were marked by lawsuits, public disputes, and professional difficulties for both. The song that defined both of their careers also ensured that neither could move fully beyond the shadow of what they had made together. Number 3, Behind Blue Eyes by The Who, Who's Next, 1971.
No one knows what it's like to be hated.
The Who had been through an extraordinary stretch of work by 1971. Tommy in 1969 had established them as one of rock's most ambitious acts. Who's Next consolidated that reputation, and Behind Blue Eyes Pete Townshend's anguished, slow-burning composition became one of the album's most enduring tracks. But Who's Next was not the album Townshend had intended to make. It was assembled from the wreckage of Lifehouse, an enormous multimedia project that Townshend had been developing for years. The concept, involving audience participation, live performance, and an elaborate narrative about music's power over society, was so complex that it eventually overwhelmed him. He suffered a breakdown trying to explain it to others and trying to hold it together as a workable project.
But my dreams,
Lifehouse was abandoned, and the best songs from those sessions were salvaged into Who's Next. The failure of Lifehouse damaged Townshend deeply. He described it as one of the most painful experiences of his professional life, a vision he could see clearly but could never translate for anyone else. The frustration and sense of artistic failure it produced shaped the tensions that ran through the band for the rest of the decade. It also left Townshend with a consuming sense of unfulfilled ambition that he would spend years trying to satisfy through other projects, not always successfully. Keith Moon's health declined sharply through the late 1970s, accelerated by years of relentless excess on the road, and he died in September 1978. John Entwistle passed in 2002. The band that recorded Who's Next has never been whole since.
but my dreams.
Number 2, Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. Rumors, 1977.
You can go your own way.
Lindsey Buckingham wrote Go Your Own Way as a direct, thinly veiled response to his breakup with Stevie Nicks, and then insisted she sing harmony on it. That alone tells you something about the particular kind of tension that ran through the making of Rumors. Nicks objected to specific lines in the song, feeling they misrepresented her behavior during their relationship. Buckingham kept them in. She sang the harmonies anyway, because the record required it, and because the professional obligation and the personal wound were impossible to separate. The song reached number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the defining tracks of the album.
Jacking up so you wanna do.
But the dynamic it captured, two people locked in creative partnership long after the personal partnership had ended, became the defining tension of Fleetwood Mac for the next 4 decades. Buckingham and Nicks worked together, toured together, and made music together through circumstances that most professional partnerships would not have survived. Their conflicts resurfaced publicly and privately on multiple occasions. Buckingham's removal from the band in 2018 came after a dispute in which Nicks reportedly told management she would leave if he stayed. The song from 1977 was still, in many ways, playing out 40 years later.
You can go your own way.
Number 1, Angie by the Rolling Stones, Goat's Head Soup, 1973.
With no loving in our souls.
By 1973, the Rolling Stones were one of the biggest bands in the world, and Angie gave them their first number 1 single in the United States since Honky Tonk Women in 1969. It was a soft, melancholic ballad, deeply out of character for a band built on raw, blues-inflected rock, and it connected with audiences in a way none of their recent work had. The problem was Mick Taylor. Taylor had joined the band in 1969 following Brian Jones's death and had quickly proven himself one of the most gifted guitarists of his generation. His playing on Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, and Exile on Main Street was foundational to some of the band's greatest work.
Angie.
By the time of Goat's Head Soup, Taylor was increasingly uncomfortable with how the band operated, specifically with questions of songwriting credit and compensation. Taylor contributed substantially to the music of that era, including arrangements and musical ideas that ended up on released recordings. and he felt that his contributions were systematically undervalued by the Jagger-Richards songwriting partnership. He left the Stones in December 1974, a departure that surprised the public, but had been building for years. The band replaced him with Ron Wood and continued, and they remain active to this day. But many who follow the Stones closely argue that the version of the band that existed between 1969 and 1974, with Taylor's fluid, melodic lead work anchoring their sound, was their creative peak. Angie arrived near the end of that era, a commercial high point shadowing the departure that was already coming.
We never tried.
If any of these stories caught you off guard, you are not alone. The gap between what a song sounds like and what it costs can be enormous. Behind some of the most beloved recordings of the 1970s were fractured friendships, impossible expectations, and creative partnerships that the success itself made unsustainable. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss what we put out next.